Hey everybody, spoilers for Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. I'm John. I'm joined again by Asim to discuss the first in an ongoing series of Nolan film deconstructions. This time we're going to be talking about The Prestige. Before we get into that, if you haven't already, do check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net, for all the latest stuff that we get up to with our global network of screenwriters. Follow us on social media. The links are in the description. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Script Department and give the YouTube channel a subscribe as well. So, Asim, we talked at length last week about Christopher Nolan, our love of Nolan films. It's really interesting to be able to kind of get our different perspectives on that out there. Today, we're going to be talking about The Prestige specifically. Without kind of going into too much detail, because I think we talked about this already last week. Tell me where you're coming to this with The Prestige. I know we're both big fans of the film, but what's your experience of having watched this film?
Actually, I saw it probably 2 years or 3 years after it's been released. And I saw it while I was actually traveling to Australia. And I managed to, find a cinema that actually shows these kind of films, these old films. And I was blown away about not just the characters, because I'm always about the characters, but also the twist and everything we see it. And I came out with a lot of questions popping in my head. How it's been done, and how actually he managed to fool us all along. And there's these questions you want to have answers. And every time you watch the film, these questions start to get some kind of a closure. And it's like opening a puzzle box, and every time you're just trying to solve an issue or a problem with it. And for me, that's one of the main things that made me want to learn more about it and learn about how to write screenplays in the first place. And also the characters and duality, and always like duality in characters and how they represent each other. And if it's, I don't want to spoil, but there's a lot of things that should be done. And that theme he is actually talking about in a very specific way. And it hurts so much for me because I'm having the same issues with my siblings. So I think that's a very good way to touch it.
I saw this film. I watched it on DVD after it came out. I didn't go see it in the cinema. I'd splashed out a ton of money that year on a big home cinema system. Biggest TV I could find, best sound system I could find. I was living in like a tiny box room at the time anyway, so I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, I had all the best gear and everything, and I just couldn't justify going to the cinema for like a year because I'd spent so much money. And so The Prestige was one of those films that I just ended up getting on DVD so that I could watch it on my amazing system. And I was so annoyed when I saw the film, just thinking I should have seen this in the cinema. And I did a good few years later, get to see it recently. I know about a year before the pandemic, I got to see an old 35mm print of The Prestige. I mentioned this in our Nolan discussion at the Truro Plaza in Cornwall. Really great old school cinema. And a beautiful screening. And there was this great Q&A with Mark Kermode, the film critic, afterwards, where, he's like just a real Nolan expert and has interviewed Nolan several times. And we were able to kind of just have a really great conversation about, as a group, about The Prestige and about the different clues and, the different intricacies of it, which we'll get through here. I really, really, really love the film. So I'll just very quickly go through the plot of the film, and then we can just go to town on it and start breaking it down from a screenwriting point of view. So you got to bear with me on this because the characters are, there's like doppelgangers and everything in this. So you've got Christian Bale plays Alfred Borden, or Freddy, which is a kind of a name that comes into play later in the story, I think. You've got Hugh Jackman plays Robert Angier, Michael Caine, who plays Cutter. He's kind of the mentor, kind of guide throughout the film. He's kind of the fixer that can make things happen for them. Scarlett Johansson plays Olivia, the magician's assistant who comes into their life and creates a kind of a wedge between Christian Bale and Rebecca Hall's marriage. And basically the idea of the story is that these two magicians, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, have had a falling out, and they go their separate ways, and they're both determined to be the best magicians in the world. Christian Bale has this amazing trick up his sleeve, which is that he can do a teleportation trick, where he can teleport from one side of the room to the other almost instantaneously. He goes into a box, comes out the other side, and no one knows how he does this. And it's like this really closely guarded secret. Hugh Jackman is determined to find what happened. Olivia Colman steals Freddie's diary, his kind of notes, his kind of black book with all his notes in it, and gives it to Hugh Jackman. And Hugh Jackman then, Angier, goes to America. He follows the clues to America. And he gets caught up in the war between Tesla and Edison, and he gets and Tesla builds him a transporter machine himself, like a very different type of thing, a very complicated kind of a electrical device, whereas Christian Bale's is just he goes into one box and comes out another. This is a full-on thing like out of Frankenstein or something. And yeah, and he realizes he's been duped. He realizes that Christian Bale sent him on a wild goose chase. And then it all kind of starts to collapse. Christian Bale's wife commits suicide because the marriage is, she can't. He seems to have like this dual personality going on. She just can't click with that. And he goes to jail. I can't remember why he goes to jail, actually. Can you tell me why he goes to jail?
He was actually in the show with Hugh Jackman, Robert. He noticed, or he was like some kind of setting a trap.
Yeah. Okay.
With the
so
the
one of the ways that Hugh Jackman's machine works is it'll create a body double. But in order for Hugh Jackman to be the only one left at the end of the show, he has to kill the body double. Christian Bale ends up discovering this, and he gets framed for the murder of Hugh Jackman. Or he gets accused of the murder of Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman goes into hiding at that point because he can't do the tricks anymore. And it's brilliant, actually, now that you remind me of it. And by the end, it turns out that the big twist in the tale is that as dark as Hugh Jackman's path is, that he's kind of created these doppelgangers and murdered them every time for the trick. Christian Bale's character, he has a twin, and he's standing right there, in front of you the whole time. You don't really realize it, and he's been jumping in and out. Like, we've been seeing the different brothers at different times and not realizing it, and his wife doesn't realize it, and his wife was essentially married to two men and never knew it, which is so dark and so twisted when you think about it. Yes. But he does it for the magic. He does it for the trick. And it's this whole idea of him just giving his entire life to protecting the trick.
Secret.
And so protecting the secret. And even his brother, like at one point he loses a finger, because he loses the top of his finger in an accident, and his brother has to then cut off his own finger in order so that they can both. There's that beautiful moment in the film where Olivia Colman is like, "How it's not healing? It's not getting better," and it's like, "Yeah, because you're now talking to the other brother," And it's so wonderfully put together. I'm kind of rambling now because there's just so much in the film that you could just show off, to anyone who hasn't seen it. So I wanted to talk about the structure of the story.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to kind of get into that. Talk to me about the structure as it kind of sits with you. Like, what are the kind of things that we can take away from this? Or, what are the kind of talking points of this structure for you?
I think it set the entire structure for the film and also for the trick. It's a parallel universe. It's a parallel kind of a structure for the trick. The first is introduction, which is the first act. Then you have the second act, which is, I
have the quote. I have the quote here.
Yes,
if you want me to read it.
That would be great.
So Cutter says at the very beginning, every great magic trick consists of three parts or acts. I love how he says
Yeah,
acts.
acts. Yeah.
Very important word there. The first part is called the pledge. The magician shows you something ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird, or a man. He shows you this object. Perhaps he asks you to inspect it to see if it is indeed real, unaltered, normal. But of course, it probably isn't. The second act is called the turn. The magician takes the ordinary something and makes it do something extraordinary. Now you're looking for the secret, but you won't find it because, of course, you're not really looking. You don't really want to know. You want to be fooled. But you wouldn't clap yet because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back. That's why every great magic trick has a third act. The hardest part, the part we call the prestige. And in that moment, he brings back the dove or the bird from the trick.
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
So the story is actually divided in the same structure, and we get to know everything by the end from the prestige kind of situation and the act, which is the act 3, and that's not all. It's just the way they have the timelines put. We see Hugh Jackman. I think with the first timeline we see, it's like almost the start of the third act in writing a script. He's going to Tesla. He's trying to, it's like coming back. He's trying to get, when you are in a war and you're putting on your suits and the machines and everything, and you're trying to am up. This is what actually Hugh Jackman is trying. He's trying to bring ammo, the device from Tesla, through his journey to America. But at the same time, once he starts to read the diaries, we go in the first, in a timeline, which is the first beginnings, where everything started. Then this is where we see Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale as friends before this rivalry actually happened between them. And then there's this timeline where it is not in the middle and not in the end. It's like somewhere bouncing between the first or the beginning and also in the middle. So it's a tricky way to write it. But once you actually see the movie and you try to understand what kind of situation they're going, they're both reading diaries. And as soon as they read the diaries, this is another timeline, I would say. In the past, everything was in the past. So we have the timeline for Hugh Jackman in the past, while reading the diaries of Christian Bale. And the same thing when Christian Bale, by the end, in the All Lost Moment, when he was sent to jail for, attempted killing, or they accuse him for killing Hugh Jackman, and he started to read the diaries that's been given to him by Hugh Jackman, but he didn't know. Actually, this is the timeline where he starts to understand what's really going on and how Hugh Jackman did his magic. So everyone is trying to, let's say his secrets, but in a way that in the end, also from the diaries, it's actually the prestige. It's the last act where he say, "Oh, I know you are reading my diaries," and it is just beautiful how you have these two parallel kind of diaries, which is the two lives, shift between those two, and each one of them is trying to live it.
Yeah, like those three stages that Cutter describes at the very beginning, that happens several times throughout the film. That's not just enough to say, oh, they have act 1, act 2, and act 3. There are these different things happening that all have their pledge, the turn, and the prestige as well. And it does the culmination at the end, of all the information making sense, of all the different pieces now, suddenly like everything's just kind of flowing into one stream now by the very end, is probably the most satisfying prestige of any film. I mean, Nolan has always made films that have some structural quirk to them, and that structure is always there, is always natural to the type of story he's trying to tell. The structure of Inception is very much mirroring the journey that they're going on. The structure of Memento is mirroring the experience of the protagonist. The structure of Dunkirk is very intentionally designed so that they can explore all the different perspectives of Dunkirk. You can't have a pilot like Tom Hardy up in the sky for a week. you can only have him up there for an hour because that's all he would have had the fuel for, or whatever, however long it is. But at the same time, you can't just show the plight of the soldiers on Dunkirk for 1 week, for 1 hour, because you're not really representing the plight of those soldiers in that, on that beach for a week. So you've got, you have to find these clever ways of getting to have everything. Tenet is a palindrome, in every way, even its title. And The Prestige is structured to be a great magic trick, and you almost feel like he could stand on a stage and tell you this story, and the story would be a magic trick rather than it just being presented as a movie. The way it's structured, it's so brilliantly done. Yeah. So I mean, when you take away all the bells and whistles of it as a magic trick and so on and so forth, for me, it's very clearly, to me anyway, a dual protagonist story. You got Hugh Jackman on his quest to create this amazing magic trick, and you've got Christian Bale on his quest to make this amazing magic trick. And both of these journeys are driven by obsession.
Yes.
They also have their A stories and their B stories. The A story for Hugh Jackman is he loses his wife at the very beginning of the film in a magic trick, in an accident that involves water as well, funny enough. Yes. It's very easy to kind of miss that connection. Actually, she went into a tank and drowned in the tank. They couldn't break her out in time. And which is a pretty dark kind of, that sets the tone perfectly for what this film is. He's done war movies. There's something about this that makes it feel like it's his darkest movie.
Yes.
Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but it does feel like this is his darkest movie in terms of the death, in terms of the tragedy, in terms of the way that the wives have to suffer in this film, and so on. At the same time, then later on, he falls for Olivia, the magician's assistant, that's working for Borden. Freddie, and so you've got that kind of A story, B story, and I think Cutter is a big part of his B story as well. Cutter is the kind of the therapist. Yes. Who's like got the guidance, he's got the advice, not the magic advice, but the spiritual advice as well. And at the same time, then on Christian Bale's side, you've got the same. You've got him. His obsession to create his trick, to be able to maintain his success and not let the success get the better of him, and be able to walk that illusion that he's walking, because he is living a lie.
Yes.
And how that affects his marriage. His wife ultimately takes her life, and it seems like he's having an affair with Olivia as well. But you realize it's not totally the case. And so they both have that A story, that B story. They both have the diaries. They're both following other people, and they're both tricking other people. They both are in pursuit of that same idea. And it is very, very structurally similar to films like Heat, the Al Pacino De Niro film. You might think, how are they in any way similar? But at their core, it is perfect dual protagonist storytelling. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to be able to write two protagonists. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that their story is a multiple protagonist story or a dual protagonist story. But oftentimes it's just a strong central character with other strong supporting characters.
Yes.
But this is actually literally, you've got two protagonists with all the same driving ingredients. Same as Heat, same as so many other dual protagonist stories. And that, I don't know if Nolan has ever done that before in another, or since. I don't know if he's done a dual protagonist story in the true sense of the word.
I don't remember. Any.
Inception is clearly a single protagonist, or Memento. Interstellar is clearly Matthew McConaughey's story. Great, strong supporting characters, but it's his story through and through. If you were to ask whose story is this, it is their story, both their stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Do you remember? I think where you say like the three acts and not just from the beginning to the end of the movie, but also the timelines. It's a 3-act structure. If we say we go with the journey of Hugh Jackman going to Tesla in the beginning when we see him, this is his journey. This is a 3-act structure where he goes, he's trying to see what's real going on. Then his quirkiness or his way of trying to convince Tesla to build him this machine. And this is the 2nd act where a lot of problems happen. Then in the end, where all lost moment when everything is burnt down by Edison's henchmen, and he thinks that he lost all his money. Then he returned back to the hotel, and he realized that there is a special box from him, from Tesla. And it's like, okay, I got you. So it's a 3-act if we see it. And every timeline, every diary is actually a 3-act. So it's like more than one movie, but they all complement each other. And it's
just to say, I do think it's worth credit. Obviously, we want to credit the author of the novel, Christopher Priest.
Yes.
I haven't read the novel. It'd be very interesting to know how the novel differs from the book, from the film. But it was. I was reading the Wikipedia page about the just for the kind of remind myself of the plot summary, and it's interesting that. When Christian Bale wasn't being considered for the role because he'd already worked on Batman. They didn't want to kind of, I guess, have Bale in too many Nolan films early on. And he reached out to Nolan for this, said, look, I really want to be a part of this. Nolan obviously has said, like, it would be unthinkable for anyone else now to play the part, in hindsight. But Nolan suggested that the actor, it's on Wikipedia, so I don't know how accurate it is. Nolan suggested that the actor should not read the original novel, but Bale ignored the advice. I think that's really interesting that Nolan didn't want them to read the novel, which suggests to me that he made a lot of significant changes to the story and or to the characters as well. And he doesn't want the actors getting confused, maybe, or kind of drawing from the wrong well, But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, quite worth mentioning. Yeah. You mentioned Tesla, and we talked about this in our last video. David Bowie's incredible in this.
Oh man. I loved watching him. I just finished the movie last night, and it was just amazing. The way he portrayed him and the way he acted, it's just, there will be no other Tesla on screen like David Bowie. God rest his soul. That's so sad that we see him gone, and he really did it so well. Even he changed, if you realize that he also changed his accent to be like Tesla.
Yeah. I don't know how accurate the accent is. I've heard people say it's not the best, but then I don't know, and I don't care really. It's Tesla. And it's so funny because there's this kind of mythology built up around Tesla. The kind of they're like, Tesla appears as characters in video games now, and he appears in, things like that. I think people are fascinated by who Tesla was, more so than about Edison. And Edison, I think, has been vilified, I think, in popular culture and films and so on through the years, because of how, I think, the kind of he's very much somebody like representing the Prestige, somebody who, bullied his way to success almost. I don't know. I'm just kind of, the impression I get from these movies and from the way that he's depicted sometimes, is that, he was pretty cutthroat in his business dealings to be number one, and Tesla was kind of stepped over and stepped on. I don't know the full history, but I love that they explore that in this, and they do it so successfully with so little detail. Hugh Jackman goes to this small town. He goes to this hotel. It's all powered by electricity, because Edison's men are here. And I don't know if it's Edison is powering the town or if it's Tesla powering the town. But
it's Tesla, I think,
it's
in
Tesla's
Colorado.
powering, okay.
Yeah.
But Edison's men are here to investigate, and I love that. I wasn't sure if it was Edison's men are here and they've set this all up and now to kind of push Tesla out, or if it's oh, Tesla's doing something here, we need to go. But yeah, either way, just that simple line from the hotel concierge, Edison's men are here or something like that, or
Mhm.
you're with the Edison company or whatever, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
suddenly, oh, okay, there's a war here, and that is so. You talked about parallels throughout the movie, the
Mhm.
parallels between Bale and Jackman's characters, the parallel between Olivia and Sarah, the two
Exactly.
loves of these men's lives. Um, and here is another parallel. You've got the rivalry between Tesla and Edison,
Mm.
and the rivalry between these other illusionists, so to speak. I mean, back then,
Mm.
science and magic, the lines were blurring. The
Yes.
magicians would have used electricity and used that science as a way to impress audiences, as Hugh Jackman does in the film when he brings his electrical box back to London.
Mhm.
It's the electricity looks like magic to everybody who's not familiar with that. Um, and I just think again, I'm sure Christopher Priest is responsible for those kind of ideas being in the story, but just brilliant, brilliant use of the ingredients of that time. Like, why set it in the 1890s? Because Edison and Tesla are over here doing their thing,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Why, why send him off on a goose chase? Because we want we want to show you those parallels between what's happening over in the States as well, and
Mm.
it's just fantastic.
If you see them, there are two magicians fighting each other or having this kind of rivalry, and also those two scientists are also having this two rivalry, and each of them are trying to get also her hands dirty. Christian Bale, I think he got his hands dirty before Hugh Jackman, and once Hugh Jackman started to get his hands dirty, this is where he couldn't stop. He become much more than Christian Bale, in terms of, I will reach and go across the red line just to achieve my goals. And I think this is the same thing that happened with Edison, where he crossed the line and went out to Tesla's house and ruined it and put it on fire. So it is similar also in terms of how I will destroy you in your career.
Who is who in this? So Hugh
Yeah.
Jackman visits Tesla,
Yeah.
but if you were to liken one of those magicians to one of those scientists, engineers,
Mhm.
who would you compare them to? Would Hugh Jackman be the Edison of the story? If we are being, because Hugh Jackman's the one with the money, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He is
Yeah,
the one with the money. And he
yeah.
already paid him. So it didn't like but he was forcing Tesla to fix his machine, as he said, even if it is someone else before him. Remember, this is
Mm.
not the first time he does it, Tesla. So there is a machine before that. And he saw
Yeah.
it. So that's why he's actually forcing him to do the same machine to do that kind of
No,
teleportation.
yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah. So is it that?
So he is
Okay,
Edison if we see him. Like
so
if we
explain that to me again now. So because you're right, you've got he goes to Tesla. Hugh Jackman
Mm.
goes to Tesla. Tesla warns him against all of this.
Yes.
Does that mean Tesla has built something before?
Yes, there
And
is a
he's built
device.
it. So there's someone else out there with this box.
Exactly. And I don't
That's
know how
brilliant.
they
That's
knew
brilliant.
it. I don't know how they knew about how it works, but I think Tesla kind of presented it in a way that's so
Sorry,
unique in that.
and it doesn't Christian Bale. I'm sorry, I'm getting really into
Yeah.
theories here now.
Yeah.
Christian Bale's character, he's the one who sends Hugh Jackman off on this goose chase. Initially,
Yes.
he's like, I want to get you as far away from me as possible.
Yes.
And he's written this coded kind of diary. I went to see a man in Colorado, blah, blah, blah. And then Hugh Jackman's like, okay, Colorado, I got to go to Colorado now, and right? That's correct, yeah?
It's the way that after reading his diaries and he couldn't find the secret. Hugh Jackman couldn't find the secret in the diaries. So then Cutter noticed that there is a double. So they actually did this kind of trick about, catching the double. And they didn't really know that he was, but they know that this guy is always with Christian Bale. He's always watching his six. He's always
Yeah,
watching his
that's it.
back.
Michael Caine literally tells you the answer to the film
Yeah.
Like halfway through the movie, he says
A
it's
double.
Fallon,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Felony. Yeah.
It's Fallon. Fallon is the key. And he's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And it goes right back to what Cutter says at the opening. He goes, now you're looking for the secret, but you won't find it because, of course, you're not really looking. So here we are through this whole film. I wonder what the
Yes.
secret is. And Cutter tells you it's Fallon. It's right there, and we refuse to accept it as an audience. I think
Yeah.
that speaks volumes about how we as audiences engage with stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
So
I'm
so
jumping all over
so
the place here.
so actually, Fallon actually falls into the trap, and they block him into some kind of a cascade, and they dig him. They actually bury him, and they force Christian Bale, who is Alfred, to come in return. If he wants him, he needs to give him the secret. What's the secret for your transport man? So he wrote a name. He said Tesla. That's it. And he gave it to him. He gave it to Hugh Jackman.
So he knows that Tesla is able to do
Yes.
this stuff.
Yes. I
Okay,
think
okay. I'm
what
gonna put a
happened,
stupid. Go on. You go.
I think the first machine is done for Christian Bale, or he was an experiment. And this is where his
Yeah,
twin was.
I was just gonna say that. I was just
Yeah,
gonna say, is Christian Bale's brother a result of Tesla's experiment?
exactly. Because if you
I
see his
never thought of
demeanor,
that.
if you see his demeanors, like he doesn't have a life. His life is what Christian Bale wants him to do. It's not. He doesn't really have a life. So even when he went to be executed by hanging, he never refused. He never actually said anything. He didn't say, "Oh, it's not me. I didn't do it." He didn't say anything. It's like he is accepting
His fate,
then
that he knows he is
yeah,
not the original.
exactly. And this is where he said, "Oh, I'm sorry for Sarah. What happened to Sarah? You have to go and live for the both of us."
So here, okay, I love the idea that these are that this is how he knew this originally. That this, I love the idea that he himself was the result of one of Tesla's experiments. I also don't like the idea because in my mind, when I think about these two brothers, I'm imagining them growing up dirt poor in London. I'm imagining them doing little pickpocket tricks out in the street. Oh, that kid picked my pocket. No, the kid is there. Is something like that. And using their double identity to get away with all sorts of shenanigans. And I love the idea that it's almost like they made a pact early on, like in their childhood. We're going to be the greatest magicians ever, but the price of that is we cannot live together. We cannot live our lives together. One of us will always have to live in the shadows, and we have to kind of swap in and out. That's the sacrifice we have to make. We can never acknowledge the other in our life. And the real test of their devotion to magic is that he's in jail, he's about to be hanged, and he refuses. He will not say, as you said, he will not say, I have a body double, I have a twin. I don't know what that would have done anyway for his case, but like he could have just as easily said that at any point, and it would have made people go, "Oh, okay." And so I think I'm excited and giddy about the idea that it could have been Tesla behind this.
Yeah,
In
that's
which case, David Bowie deserves a bigger round of applause. But
yeah. If how did Christian Bale knew about Tesla? When
yeah,
Tesla
it
first introduced his machine, the first time, there was Christian Bale there with Hugh Jackman, and they actually stopped the. I think Edison Min kind of empowered the people responsible about the audition, and tried to make his show just go to smithereens. I mean, so they actually put down the electricity, but Christian Bale was there, and this is where Hugh Jackman kind of saw him, and he was surprised that what brings you here. So it's like,
is there
was
any
it?
part? Because you watched the story. Sorry, you watched the movie yesterday.
Yeah.
Is there any part of the movie where Christian Bale acknowledges that he was in America, or that he was traveling, or that is there any timeline, or there any part of his life where you can pinpoint that's probably the moment he met Tesla?
in the show, it's like a demonstration of electricity, and it's
Mm.
an exhibition for Tesla,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
Tesla wasn't there. The one who's there is Andy Serkis, Ali. His name's Ali or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Andy Circus, yeah.
so and he said it's totally safe and everything. Then we see Christian is so close to the device, and Hugh Jackman was not that close. So we know that how close they are to Tesla as well. So Hugh Jackman still have so much time to get to where Christian Bale is to Tesla. So for me, I would. This is the beauty of the film. Even if we say this kind of theory, but also if we go to the end where Christian Bale kills Hugh Jackman, is that the real Hugh Jackman, or is it the double? And you want to see if Christian Bale's going to go and kill him. 'Cause all this time, he is under the name of Caldwell, the very filthy
Yeah,
rich.
the
Yeah,
Lord.
the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is it? Is he still living as Caldwell, and those doubles are playing him as as the magicians, or what is it actually about? Because don't forget that they are created with the same conscience, with the same emotions. You know,
So we
yeah.
talked about this in our talk. So they
Mm.
when I went to see that screening in Truro Plaza, we had a discussion with everybody was having this kind of discussion afterwards in the audience with Mark Kermode about the idea that is Hugh Jackman the Hugh Jackman that you see at the very end of each trick. So what happens is Hugh Jackman does it, he does an hour of magic tricks or whatever it is, and then for the final trick, I'm going to transport myself to the other side of the theater, and then he steps into the box. All the electricity happens. He's like, showing off, like I'm being electrocuted or whatever the case, and then he disappears. He falls into a tank of water and he drowns, and then the duplicate appears on the other side. Now, they show you in the movie Hugh Jackman doing this experiment for the first time in in an empty loft, and he has a gun ready and he shoots the first duplicate that appears, and so the assumption is that this machine is creating the duplicate that appears at the other end of the theater.
Yes.
So when Hugh Jackman comes out for the Prestige at the end, he's bringing the dove back, so to speak. When Hugh Jackman reappears, I think it's heavily suggested that is the duplicate. But that doesn't make any sense, because that means that Hugh Jackman is prepared, that he kills himself like way early on, and the very first time he does the trick. Now, I don't believe that he would do that, because my problem, and this was the conversation that we were having, was this man who's so obsessed with the fame, he's so obsessed with the validation, he's so obsessed with the the drive for perfection. He's not just going to kill himself in the first trick, because he would want to be the one to receive the applause.
Yes.
So you explained to me then in the last talk that maybe it's the case where the duplication is done elsewhere. It's done like in the loft somewhere.
Yes.
We sneak the second Hugh Jackman into the theater up in the rafters somewhere, up in a box somewhere, and then it's duplicate Hugh Jackman does all the magic tricks. He then falls into the tank and drowns. He doesn't realize he's going to drown. But then original Hugh Jackman is waiting up in the rafters to come out and go, ta-da! That feels like a much more credible explanation for what's happening. I think the mistake maybe a lot of viewers are making is, because I've seen this question come up a lot, is they see the box with the electricity and think that the teleport, the duplication is literally happening in that moment. Are we still certain? You watched it again last night. Are you still on board with the idea that what we discussed last week?
Yes, I'm actually with you. And also, I think when you remember on the stage, I think every time they do the duplicate, there is a duplicate even underground. He is ready for the next show. So the real Hugh Jackman is still, on top to show in the end, like once the duplicate is actually drowned, or with the hidden door underneath him falls into the tank, the real Hugh Jack comes out. But there is still another duplicate that just been created, but not on stage. He's somewhere else, somewhere down. That's why he said to Cutter, "I don't want you to see it, to be behind the scenes,"
Wait,
or
see,
like,
I always read that as he doesn't want him to see the dead bodies.
it's both ways. I think
Okay,
it's both
okay.
ways, because Cutter didn't really understand what's really going on. He was suspicious about every night. By the end of the show, and when everyone leaves this, leave the stage, they put on these glass, caskets, or let's say these glass, and it's covered, and the people who are actually taking it are blind,
I'm
so they
blind as
don't.
well. That's
Yeah,
fantastic. It's such a
so
brilliant
it's
touch. Yeah.
like, I don't know, and this is where it got his curiosity, Cutter, and I think this is how he helped Christian Bale to know where Hugh Jackman by the end. It's like a help way to end all this craziness between them, and this is where he went and killed him. But is he the real Hugh Jackman, or is it the
He
double that's been killed?
but
So
I think he has to be, because
yeah,
otherwise, people have said that about Inception. Like, at the end, is it all a dream? Like, is the thing still spinning at the end? Is it a dream? And I'm like, no, it's not, because what is the point of the film then? What is the point of this emotional journey of kind of self-healing that he goes on in this film? What is the point of us being nervous about him being let through customs at the end and all that, if it's all just still a dream? I don't think Christopher Nolan would do that. I think that's just a nice little visual cue to end the film on. But people went crazy. People were like, "Oh, it's all a dream. It's still a dream. He's still stuck in the dream and all that." And we'll do a video about Inception. But with this, I don't see what the point of the film would be if Hugh Jackman sacrificed himself. The original Hugh Jackman, who lost his wife, sacrificed himself in the very first trick, because the whole point, I would say, every magician relishes the ta-da moment where the audience just goes, how do you do that? I think every magician wants that moment, wants that reaction. It's like a comedian telling a joke and letting somebody else deliver the punchline while they walk off stage. It's like, no, you want the reaction. You want to elicit that reaction. It's like Christopher Nolan just handing control over the film to somebody else. I don't think he would ever do that.
exactly.
So I can't imagine that they would write the story in a way where Hugh Jackman's character is that Hugh Jackman that we came to associate with early on in the first act is now gone.
No. I think he was
Yeah.
dead by the end. I don't think he
Yeah.
was dead, because if you realized that, it was hinted in a way. You remember where they started to find a double for him, and they found this British Hugh Jackman, and he was always drunk and all that. So, and he was always that drunk guy is the one who was taking all the applause, while Hugh Jackman was falling in the trapdoor, and just so angry about all the applause for this drunk guy, and I'm the one who's working so hard to do these tricks. So I think he didn't want to do the same mistake with the doubles, with this machine. So the people who are dead, the people underneath the stage, are the duplicates. But the real Hugh Jackman is the one who will,
And that
show.
means then that the teleportation, the duplication isn't happening in the moment. It's
No.
happening beforehand.
Yes.
That kind of makes sense. I did want to I'm glad you talked about the British Hugh Jackman in this. So along the way, I think Scarlett Johansson finds a drunken British failed actor who looks identical to Hugh Jackman, and just has a thick British accent, and that's it. But they're basically identical. I don't think there's any real difference, other than maybe a little prosthetics on the face to just make his
here, like in
make
the
his
mouth,
look a little
appears some.
different. And he comes in and he's able to do the trick, and everything is great for a while, and then eventually Christian Bale sabotages, or Christian Bale gets in his head and is like, you could be asking for a lot more money and all that, and he starts holding him to ransom and all that. And it's what prompts Hugh Jackman to say, right, I need to do this better. I had a big problem with that moment, because for me that was the moment where I thought, okay, you're relying on absurdities to be able to give credibility to the magic. So there's a movie series called Now You See Me, and I've seen the first one, and I only saw it once. I can barely remember anything from it, but I remember they're doing these tricks, but it's not possible for them to be doing these tricks. It's not real magic. It's not illusion. It's literally, you've got a visual effects department here allowing this to happen. There's no possible explanation in the world of that film as to how you could do it. The only way would be if Doctor Strange was there, making this happen, right?
Yeah.
That's cheating. That's, you're making a movie that's about magicians who use their skills to perform, robberies and theft and so on, right? That's a great premise. But they're doing magic tricks that no one could ever do, right? And the thing that annoyed me I think the first time I saw The Prestige was, okay, everything else is great, but you're relying on an absolute identical of Hugh Jackman in London. And just how coincidental we managed to find him as well for this. It's not only is there a body double out there for Hugh Jackman in this world, but they find him in London and recruit him, and he's perfect. He's washed up. He needs the money. He's perfect for it. And I really hated that, because I thought, no, you see, Christian Bale, his character he's not relying on he's not relying on kind of universe breaking conceits. He has a twin brother, but the dedication to his craft has meant that they've hidden that fact their whole lives. Hugh Jackman just found a twin. It's like a long lost twin brother. And I'm sorry, but that is his twin. I mean, he needs to get if this was any later or more contemporary, I would be saying get a DNA test, right?
Yeah.
But when I saw the film in recently, or a few years back, watching the 35mm screening, I started to accept that actually that's okay, because it's reinforced by if there's an element of fantasy there, that there's this duplicate around the place, it's reinforced by the equal fantasy of the kind of science fiction component that Tesla brings to the table.
Yes.
You can't complain about a body double here and praise Tesla's invention, because they're both cheap. They're both not cheap. They're both implausible.
Exactly.
But he does such a great job of making you accept and buy into Tesla's invention that, for me as an audience member, I'm okay now with the duplicate as well. The Hugh Jackman body double, failed actor. I'm okay with that, because this is a world where we are going to have some contrivances, and you just go along with it. And that's the thing that Nolan is always really good at, I think, is he's able to make you go along with the contrivances that I think any other filmmaker would get criticized for. I would criticize other filmmakers for those kinds of contrivances, but I don't criticize Nolan for it, because he just has a way of saying go with it.
Yeah. I think it was like a foreshadowing about what's going to happen with Tesla. When they brought the drunk Hugh Jackman, it's like, okay, he's not going to stay for a long time. And if we calculate how many times he's been on the screen, it's barely even 4 minutes. The entire thing is just 4 minutes. It's just to set the audience to accept what's going to happen with Tesla is beyond your imagination. It's beyond where he can not just make one Hugh Jackman, he can make a dozen of Hugh Jackman. And every day he can do it. As much as he's put on the machine, there is another Hugh Jackman. to be honest, when I saw the machine, I said, "Oh man, if I can do it, I will make tens of me, and I will make everyone do a certain job. One to play with the kids and one to go and do the errands, and I will just go and relax in a cottage somewhere where it's snowy and have a husky and."
We would have so many podcast
Oh
episodes done.
man!
It would be amazing.
So yeah. I think
Okay.
it's just to make the audience believe about what's going to happen next. Because if we go scientifically, it's not possible, as you say. But because we see it in a time where everything is about Tesla, and people are talking about how great he is, and there's a lot of invention that he did that the U.S. government actually, and also Edison confiscated, and it's never been revealed. So I think this is one way from Kristen Noel to say maybe Tesla did this, and the government doesn't want to really show it to us. It's something like he's hinting. I want to believe that. I'm always about conspiracy.
Yeah. I don't subscribe to the idea that he would have actually made this, but I can subscribe to the idea in the movie, and I don't think I have the right to complain about drunken Hugh Jackman if I am so accepting of the conceit that the whole third act is built around Hugh Jackman being able to duplicate himself. So we talked about the just staying on the structure. We talked about, we've got the pledge, we've got the turn, and then we got the prestige. I think the pledge, let's kind of break that down and kind of understand it. So for me, I think the pledge is the active question at the beginning. It's one of these magicians is better than the other. We're going to find out which one. One of them is, or even both of them, are able to do things that is just that we don't understand how they're doing this, and we want to get to the heart of it. How do they do this magic trick? Which one of them is the better magician? Who will be the most successful, and so on. Like, these are the kind of active questions that the film is pledging to answer. And I think that's such a lovely phrase. I love that, the pledge. I think we should be incorporating that language into screenwriting more, because that is what we do as screenwriters. We are pledging to take audiences on an emotional journey, or we're pledging to take audiences on the greatest heist experience they've ever been on, or and that's what Hugh Jackman does in every film. When you see the trailer for Dunkirk, he is pledging to take you to Dunkirk in the 1940s, and yeah. So to me, that's kind of where this begins, and it almost feels like the pledge is starting in the marketing of the film as well. That you're almost going into this film knowing, in the same way that when people are paying to see Christian Bale do his teleporter trick, or Hugh Jackman's teleporter trick, they're paying because they've seen the poster, they've seen the reviews, they've heard the word of mouth on the streets. Have you seen this trick yet? It's amazing. And so there's a pledge already before they've even gotten into the room. And that's kind of how I think about this, is that we're already sold on, we're going to get this great rivalry between these great actors, great magicians, and then you've got the turn, which I think is just the movie itself. I would say Act 1 and Act 2 are the turn. I think it's easy to say the pledge is Act 1, but I think the pledge extends beyond, earlier than that, I would say. And I do think you have to, how else do audiences know to go see this film? How else do they know this film exists? There is. Do
you think it's like a trailer? Is it? Does it replay the role of the trailer, the pledge?
I think so, because if you or any marketing material, because if you think about a magician, using Cutter's analogy, the magician shows you something and says, "I'm going to do something extraordinary with this." Right?
Yes.
That's the pledge. I pledge to you that I will do something extraordinary with this. deck of cards. Well, isn't that what movie marketing is?
As exactly.
You
Trailers
know?
are giving you the best thing in the movie to say, okay, we'll show you something beyond your imagination. We actually promise you will come, and not just it's not a popcorn movie. You will be excited to the limits. This is what the trailer is actually supposed to do. For the marketing, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot to learn about screenwriting from the structure of this film. And The Pledge, I think, is one of the most valuable moments because I remember when I saw the film first, and I wasn't that familiar with kind of screenwriting terminology or anything back then. And I'm hearing this, The Pledge, and I'm thinking, because I knew a little bit about magic, and I'm thinking, I get it. I see the parallel. I'm trying to learn screenwriting, and this guy, Cutter says The Pledge, and I'm thinking that makes sense to me. Like that made sense to me from a screenwriting point of view. Yeah, I don't think people really, whenever I teach active questions, there's the kind of those questions in the mind of the audience that the film is trying to explore. I always say don't go for the obvious one, like will the person get revenge? We know they're going to get revenge because like it would be a pretty bad revenge movie if they didn't try and explore that. That doesn't to say they have to continue on that path throughout the whole film, but it would be a pretty weak revenge movie, so to speak, or a pretty weak heist movie if they didn't attempt to do the heist. So will they try to do the heist? That's a pretty boring active question because the audience already knows the answer to it. But and I think you have to ask yourself, rather than trying to force a question, or rather than trying to force the hand of the audience down a particular pathway, you need to be asking yourself, what information do they come to this movie with already? And the trailer and the marketing and all that kind of stuff is where you can make those judgment calls. Now, obviously, this stuff gets made after the film is made, after the screenplay has been written, for years, perhaps. So how do you work that in? Well, you have to think, okay, what kind of information could I assume an audience will have? And a film about magic is presumably a film about a rivalry is presumably not going to give away which one is the best or how the trick is done, but it will at least tell you you're in for a great journey of, a great rivalry story here. And so the audience then can come in with that pledge already in their mind. I think that's a really, really kind of useful turn. The turn itself, then, I love that again because we talk about turning points in storytelling. Each act having a new turning point that takes the story in a brand new direction. And if movies, if magic tricks are all about misdirection, see this ball that I asked you to look at the beginning in The Pledge? Well, now I'm going to distract you over here while I swap that ball for something else, or whatever the case may be. Like that is, for me, I love that line, the turn, or that phrase, the turn, because it represents everything that we do in the second act of the film. We explore the ideas, but we're very subtly taking you away from what you think the story is going to go in. Because if we just go down the road that you assume, it's a boring movie. But if we can pull you away from that tragic outcome and make you feel positive about the story, and then give you that tragedy at the end, wow, that hits you like a ton of bricks, doesn't it? So I think I love that phrase as well. And then The Prestige, the idea of not just giving the audience one answer, but giving them something after that, like a reward for their attention, I think is also something that's very, very valuable in screenwriting. I think a lot of third acts, from aspiring screenwriters fall down because they only give you that one ending. The one ending in a magic trick of making the bird disappear is, here's a bird, I made the bird disappear. But as Cutter says, that's not enough. You have to be able to bring it back. And it's the same in movies. It's not enough to just say, oh, well, I found the bad guy and we killed the bad guy, and now, Bond has killed the bad guy, movie's over. No, even in the most basic Bond films from the 70s or the 60s, they always had the prestige moment at the end, which was that Bond is on the train with the love interest, and, they're getting ready for dinner. And then who appears outside the door of their carriage? The bad guy's henchman, Oh wow, I forgot about him, and now there's a showdown. That one last showdown, or in a whodunit. Whodunits are great magic trick movies because they'll show you like in the Prestige, the answer is right there in front of you. It's one of these people, and it's probably this person. They probably don't even try to hide it that well, but they'll take you on this journey of misdirection to make you forget all your theories, and then they'll say, "Oh, it was that person." Now you're like, "Oh wow, okay, I know the ending now." But it's not enough. You got to give them something else. It turns out they were working for this person, and so I see this. I'm kind of rambling here, but I see this structure so often in movies, and I think there's so much you can take away from the Prestige in how to write movies, not just because of the way Nolan wrote that movie, but because of the philosophies that the magicians in those movies have.
Yes.
Yeah,
and the rivalry between them as well. And I think with the first scene we see with Cutter trying to explain, to show the small, bird trick to, Kristen Bale's daughter, and how we actually, in the end, we realized that the bird was actually hit underneath. There's a floor that opens, then the cage is actually closed, and then he actually have another bird in his hand. It's actually foreshadowing everything happening in the movie. The death of Hugh Jackman's doubles, the death of Olivia, Olivia, I think, the first, Hugh Jackman's wife as well. So there is a sacrifice.
And the death of Christian Bale's brother.
Exactly, yeah. So I think sacrifice is one of the things that really show so much in the film. And to reach the high status of being a magician, you need to sacrifice so much about your life, about your personal life, sometimes even your, some of your blood. You have to sacrifice. That's how you reach that level of being the best magician.
It's blood, sweat, and tears, isn't it?
Yeah. And it is. If you saw it like Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan on this movie, I think they did their, to be honest, this is one of the best films. Even seeing it, like, it's 2006. Come on, and like it's been what, 18 years now, maybe, or 2000. I think about 18, maybe 18.
Well, it was probably filmed in 2005.
Yeah,
so even later.
It still stands out as one of the best films. I mean, my wife came and she just sat down with me in the middle of the film. She doesn't understand what's really going on, but she was taken about the entire theme and the entire. She's a photographer and she's also a cinematographer, so she is taken by how it's been shot. And I think the way it's been shot gives it so much appeal also to the magic tricks and how it's actually portrayed in this movie. And there's also this foreshadowing in every direction. And like all magicians in the world, there's also this beautiful girl that they bring on the stage to misdirection so they can do it. And I remember there's a scene, it's a different movie, it's called Swordfish. I don't know if you ever seen it.
Oh yeah, I've seen Swordfish. Yeah.
Remember what he said about Houdini?
I can't remember the line. I watched that film a lot when it came out.
Man,
I used to love that film, but I haven't seen it in a long time. Go on.
He said the best thing about to convince audience is about misinterpretation or misdirection. Misdirection is the entire film about the Prestige. It's also misdirection. Thinking that you were going this way, but it's on the other side. It's actually something else. So I love how it's done.
And it's just seen. It's seen so perfectly. And how many times, you had a point here on the list of conversation points about the clues throughout the film, and there are lots of moments in this story that give away what's actually happening. There's literally the moment where Cutter says, "It's Fallon. Fallon is the key," and we just don't. Even if we go along with it, we ignore it. And I think we ignore it because Hugh Jackman ignores it, and we trust that character. And you can't just, it's not just structure that allows this stuff to happen. You've got to make the characters have to be good characters. And it's proof again that we put our trust in characters in movies. If we don't trust Hugh Jackman's character, we don't trust his genius and his knowledge and his expertise, then when he says, "Oh, it's not Fallon," most of us are just going to go, "No, probably it is. You idiot. He's telling you the answer right now," And instead, we go with him. I mean, I go with him, and I think most people do. I think the success of the movie speaks to the fact that we all go with him on this journey, and that we trust him. And it's, I think, the same as well with Christian Bale's character. He delivers it so well, and he's written so well that when Sarah says to him, you love me sometimes, you don't always love me. You loved me yesterday, but you don't love me today. What they're really saying is, I'm not talking to my husband. I'm talking to my husband's twin brother right now. But they're not. Again, it's such a peculiar thing to say. But rather than challenging it, you just go with it. You just say, well, these are emotionally complicated people. And they're in a kind of a very troubled marriage. And this is what people in these relationships will say to each other. And we just go with it because we trust the character building and the relationship building. Yeah.
I mean, the two female characters are the two female characters who discover that Christian Bale already have some influence, or suspect there is another Christian Bale, or there is another, double. And it's especially with his wife, Sarah, when he said, "I love you," and he said, "Today you mean it." And then there is another scene where she said, "Today you don't mean it." So, and it's like and as they say, the women always have a sixth sense about their husband, if he's telling the truth or not. So I think this is so good to be put on. And also, I think it's Olivia Scott Johansson, when she was talking to him, and she said, "It's not funny. It's so cold to not feel about your dead wife." And she wasn't talking to the real husband. She was talking to the double, who actually fell in love with her. So there is this kind of, let's say, point from their side, and it's just some kind of hints to the audience that there is a double. And I love how they actually did it in a very clever way. It's not like in the face.
Yeah. It's, but that's the genius of it. I think there are moments where it's very much in your face. And we don't see it because the misdirection is so brilliant. It is possible that, we're so used to Nolan, and I want to talk about the Nolan brothers now. You had mentioned that you wanted to discuss them. We associate Christopher Nolan now with IMAX and state-of-the-art visual effects, and there's never a movie that doesn't get an Academy Award nomination now, or he's pushing boundaries all the time. This is, it's not an easy film to make, but it's not a complicated film from a production point of view. He's not asking for anything that a typical period drama, or 1800s, Sherlock, like the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes films are probably more complicated to make than this, right? Same setting, kind of, more or less. But I would argue this is more likely to be his masterpiece than the complicated films he's made. And I wouldn't have put this top of my list of Nolan films when I first saw it. But after I saw it in the cinema at that special screening, I think it very quickly shot up on my list. And maybe it's that wiser as a screenwriter, after that, and seeing the real magic of the film, so to speak. I think Inception is his masterpiece, and I can explain why in another day. But I think this really gives Inception a run for its money, in terms of where it stands in his abilities as a filmmaker. I love his work in Batman, in the Batman films, but I've always said I don't know why it's so hard for people to make good Batman films. Because Batman has been around for 80 plus years? 70 plus years when he was making it, 60 plus years when he was making them. It shouldn't be that hard. You've got this archive of characters, of material, of settings, of plot lines. You've got all the dialogue just written out for you over thousands and thousands and thousands of editions of graphic novels. I'm not saying that he had an easy job in those films, but I don't give him full credit. I've been reading some Batman graphic novels, recently over the last 12 months, and I noticed moments from Batman Begins in it, and I noticed moments from The Dark Knight, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm seeing a little bit of inspiration here coming from these. So I credit where credit is due. I think Batman Begins is an absolute masterpiece. I think The Dark Knight, I'll be teaching The Dark Knight to my students for the rest of my life. Not big on Dark Knight Rises, but that's a different story. But I think he did incredible work there when others failed. But I don't see why it's so hard for others to fail, or why it's so hard for them to succeed, rather, because it's all laid out for you, surely. And I know it's adaptation and so on, but come on, Zack Snyder has done pretty competent work from being, from sometimes very slavishly following the source material. The Prestige, is a novel, but it requires a hell of a lot of work to be able to translate that into a film where we can see, not just read, where we can see the clues right in front of us. And he's able to just fool us the whole way.
Yes, exactly. I think as brothers, for me, I think this is the best film for him, to be honest with you, because it's not heavily, as to say, influenced by a lot of material. You have so much time to rummage through this entire materials and try to cherry pick what's really good in them and what kind of fits your kind of vision about this film, like the Batman. But I think this is much more personal, on a personal level. This is talking about the Nolans. Who's really doing you out? Who's really wrote the script? Who's the guy who really polished it so good that made it as we are seeing it? I know it's like when you see the Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, I think they are a metaphor for Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan. Each one of them is actually hiding behind each other. And sometimes Jonathan is doing the heavyweight in terms of screenplay, but it's always foreshadowed by Christopher Nolan. So I think this is so much appealing to them, and it hits so many points as brothers, and they are in the same industry, and each of them are continuing the same process, and they both of them are working for the same goal. One of them is professional screenwriter and the other one is a director, but they are both working in the same field. And sometimes, Jonathan is also directing like a couple of episodes on Westworld and a lot of TV series. But also, Christian Nolan is more about the film's industry in terms of, directing. So it's a parallel when you see your two main characters. And I think that's why it's so good. And it's only cost $40 million.
Yeah.
And this is
a hell of a lot of money. Yeah.
110 million. So it's doubled and tripled where it's supposed to be, And don't forget that it is after the Batman Begins. So Christopher Nolan is just getting into the momentum of being known. So I think if he did it now, I don't think he's gonna do it as this one, as good as this one.
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I think you're right there. I think there's, I cannot do what Christopher Nolan does and what Jonathan Nolan does. I mean, they just have a way of telling stories and a way of imagining things. And I think Tenet is the thing that made me, obviously I'm in awe of so many of his films. But when I saw Tenet, not my favorite of his films, but it was the film that made me think, I don't know how his brain works. There are things in Tenet, like little little things that the characters have to do in the world because the laws of the world and the laws of the kind of time travel and so on. I just think I just have no idea how you came up with that at all. Like, it would take me years to come up with solutions to those things, you know? And I'm just totally in awe. But I do agree that if he made The Prestige now, I don't know if he would, I think maybe he seems to, I think the difference between the films he was making back then and the films he's making now is there's a greater degree of just go with me, whereas he worked harder to make you go with him in the previous films. And it's a very slight difference, but I think his ideas have gotten more complicated. It's not like he slipped in quality. I just think his ideas have become bolder and braver. The kind of films that you'd never get past the producers in the past, he's able to get the money for now. And he's probably not having to pitch as hard as he would have had to before. And so maybe he feels more confident in the audience and the way that they will go with him. But you're not always going to go with him on everything. You can't. Not every idea is just going to sell straight away, you know. And so it does feel to me that I think, The Prestige wouldn't quite be the same levels of perfection that it is if it was made now. It might even be longer and maybe more kind of complicated in terms of the techniques he would have used, because he's definitely somebody with a bigger appetite for how he makes his movies now. I think you're absolutely right as well. I think that it's not a rivalry between the two brothers. There's no rivalry between them. But I think as an audience member who loves Westworld with equal affection, I hold Westworld and films like Inception in equal measure, frankly. You know, two different beasts, obviously, but I love both of them. And if you said, do you want to binge watch Westworld over the weekend, or do you want to binge watch Christopher Nolan's films over the weekend? I don't know which one I would choose, because I love them all so much. And so I do kind of in my mind think who's better at, every now and again. But I mean, it's just. But
I think Christian
they're
Bale,
in sync, these two characters.
I think Christian Bale is the representation of Nolan's. This is my belief.
Yeah. They are in sync. These two brothers in sync, being able to perfect these magic tricks, being able to perfect this illusion. Even the wife doesn't know which brother she's talking to. And I love that idea that, as I've said before in our Nolan talk, like, I can tell when it's a George Lucas idea or when it's a Steven Spielberg idea. I can tell when this is, from this particular person or from this particular person. I can tell when, this is a Martin Scorsese approach to this scene. This is, what was done by the screenwriter and so on and so forth. Like, I watched West Side Story over the weekend, written by Tony Kushner, I believe. And he, I could tell, right, that's definitely a Spielberg moment right there. Whether that was in the original or not, there's something very Spielberg about that. I can't tell where Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan separate. In any of their films. And I think that just speaks to just the genius. It isn't just Nolan, it's the Nolans.
The Nolans, yes.
Like the Wachowskis, like, so on and so forth.
The Coen brothers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, the Coen brothers and so on. Yeah. Final thoughts?
I actually recommend people to go and rewatch it after this session, because a lot of clues will actually help you understand how to watch it. We hope that we didn't ruin it for you, but it's really appealing to study this movie as a screenwriting kind of course, and also a screenwriting way of how to write a proper screenplay where it's a lot of tricks about it. How you can actually contain the audience for a long time with you along the journey. And it's I think it's 2 hours and 15 or 30 minutes, I think. So it's not an easy watch. So, but they never actually bored you in anything. So
no. It that time flies by, and I think you're right. There's a lot you can learn about how to tell a great story here, because it's all about, at the end of the day, keeping the audience's attention. What's the point of a magic trick? To keep the audience's attention for the longest possible moment. You know, you could let them go after the turn, but you don't. You keep them there for the prestige, and you give them that one last pop, which makes them want to come back next time. And great performances have that. They have their encores and so on. And great movies have all of those ingredients as well. And you can learn so much about how to write a great movie from that. And your film doesn't have to be 2.5 hours long by incorporating these ideas in. It doesn't have to be a complex magic trick to incorporate these just simple ideas that understand how audiences engage with content. You know, can just change your game completely. Thanks very much, Asim. Great conversation. We'll have to do another Nolan film next week. Thanks very much for listening as well. Do check us out on social media. Hit the links in the description. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just search for The Script Department, and you can check out our website as well, thescriptdepartment.net, to see what our global network of screenwriters is getting up to. Thanks very much, everyone.